sizes, and I got that one in the back.
Hey, folks. Whoop. It's one of the reasons we have such latitude in our construction. Where are you from? Checks and balances. As long as we keep aerobatics, when I approve an airplane, I'll check to see what aerobatics are approved for that design, and so limit you to demonstrate 40-hour test period, and you must log each aerobatic maneuver you do.
As long as you're outside of the props, it's fine.
Some of them guys got right next to the landing.
But I usually don't.
Fix it again.
I know it. Every time I see you, you're under there.
This damn thing's always broke. Every time I take the cowling off, you got to work on it. Cord. Turn that off. Got to get this all stiffed up so I can win them awards, you know.
Don't forget to take the cup out of there, Lord.
Huh? Missed a spot?
Yeah, you got to get those numbers off.
Well, them numbers are my numbers.
Oh, 52, yeah.
Yeah, that's my birthday. So I'm almost a birthday boy.
Yep.
Next A week from Monday?
Jerry's airplane is where he's going to hold that presentation. That's on the far right-hand side, the KR tri-gear done. Also, I'd like to make one last announcement for registration. Our registration's up here at the doorway. We're going to close it down in 10 minutes. For those that haven't registered, wish you would, registration. In about 10 minutes, the ejection of the aircraft will start between 12 and 2 o'clock. So be aware, we need to take those cowlings off so these guys can take a look down your engines and see what we've done there. Just to let you know.
I bet it was. Yeah, it took a long time just to figure out a way to do it. Sure, sure. That's my pedo tube. Very nice. That's a part off a 1950s mimeograph machine. Yeah, all those 6-month sentences like that fellow said in the last newsletter. Yeah, I know. Well, I had a lot of friends up in Michigan, you know, that helped me out with some of this. Then I just sit up fooling around and worry about the shimmy dampers and all that stuff. I just went to dance. I don't like it just as well as mine as far as the way it's steered. Well, before I put the wheel pin on there, I was cruising around about 150 miles an hour. That's 2.5 years before I finished. I'm going to have that one right there. That landing system right there.
Everybody get one of them
Hey.
Okay, I just wanted to thank everybody for showing up. This is a highlight of our year, and it's, as usual, a good turnout and lots of fun. I brought my youngest daughter, Susan, with me. This is the first KR gathering she's been to since the first one that was held in Tulsa. I hadn't realized it until we got ready to go that she had missed all of these. So she did have a good time, and she has had one ride since we got here in a glass there, but...
Okay.
But we enjoyed watching the airplanes fly a little while ago. I was glad the weather cleared up a little bit. Maybe tomorrow we can do some more flying. 3 of my KR2S builders were nice enough to order the top decks for us. And last year when they were here, I told them that, you know, if you want to order, why, I'll ship them in for you and we can show them off and share them, because I think a lot of you have not had the opportunity to see what the parts do look like. We'll start and just look forward here. This is our new cowl. It was designed for a RevMaster, but it will fit any number of different types of engines under the cowling here. The new part is epoxy pre-pregged. This has a honeycomb core in it, vacuum bagged and oven cured. We have the canopy frame. The canopy, and this is not the way you're going to fly. This is a protective covering that peels off. And then our new turtle deck. The new KR2F is 16 inches longer than the stock KR2. A lot of people have asked me, how did you come up with this design? And I said, well, it was market driven. My builders were doing this and they were asking for it, and I really give all of you guys the credit for it. We have worked on this now for approximately 2 years and we're real pleased. The first one has been flying with all the new parts on it by Roy Marsh out of Santa Maria, California. He flew it into Sun and Fun and raced it in the race and did better than 190 with his RevMaster 2100, had a turbo on it. And he had a nice trip going across. He also flew it to Oshkosh for us and helped us with our booth there. Wanted to come here, but he said, well, he just done about all the cross countries he's could for a while. He plans on being here next year. Before I go any further, I wanted to talk to you too about the different questions that people call in and ask about. They're concerned about what engines will fit under this cowl. And I think Bob Lester said, is Bob around here? Want to come up here? And he and Steve Mackish are doing a lot of work on the KRs with the Subaru engines.
Yes, Steve has got his flying right now. He's got almost 100 hours on it. And it's running great. It's doing better. And he had a Porsche engine before, and it's just light years ahead of the Porsche. It's just pulling the machine through the air with the greatest of ease. And I'm not very good at giving speeches. If I have any direct questions, I can do a lot better. Subaru, yeah.
Which engine?
Right now, he's running the Subaru E81, the 100-horse version, the dual carb, and he's running electronic ignition, and he's getting ready to put fuel injection in it too.
Which gearbox or direct drive?
He's running his with the an NSI gearbox. Matter of fact, he's doing the development for them. They wanted to set up a package to be able to hook it up to the Subaru for the KR.
What's the weight?
His weight, I'm not sure. I ran mine. I put mine together regular E81 with the Dave Johnson reduction drive, belt drive, and it worked out to about 180 pounds before he stuck it on the plane with, you know, engine mount and all that.
What's the total weight of the plane?
Steve's plane?
Yeah.
I don't know.
What reduction drive? What gear is it?
They're both working out to, right now what's mainly available is about 1.69 to 1. And for the KR conversion, that seems a little slow. It slows your prop speed down below, say, 750 feet per second. And we found that's not the most optimum we can get, but right now we're working on, NSI is offering another ratio to Steve. And also I've been looking for a different upper pulley for mine to speed it up a little bit more. But he's cruising about 170. Warp drive, 3-bladed, 54-inch. We both have the old style retract gear, so we're kind of limited on the length of the prop.
You go 54, okay?
Yeah, we're running 54s. They haven't seen any real problems with it. They're not landing in gravel either. But we're coming up soon is going to be able to go for Rand fixed gear to get the nose up in the air in order to get some longer blades from warp drive.
Can you answer one of my questions?
Sure.
Okay, one of the things that I get asked all the time is, what mods do we have to make to this cowl that you're supplying with us? This is, at this point in time, the only cowl that we have for the 2S. The 2S firewall is almost 2 inches wider than the stock KR2, and we've only tooled up so far for this one cowling. We are in the process of tooling up for a Continental 0200. We do have the Continental mount available also. So I was really anxious to find out what someone had to do, what mods they had to make the Subaru cowling work. And both Steve and Bob have used our regular cowl. Can you describe to them?
Well, mainly it wasn't that involved actually. We have when I had a Rev Master, Steve had his Porsche, and both had blisters down in here to allow for you know, of course, the air to exit and whatnot. And that seemed to fit the oil tank for the Subaru perfect. And what we've done is both of us have run radiators on the sides. They come out right about in here. So basically you're going to do a cutout for the radiators on either side. And that's about it. As a matter of fact, we just took this cowling over here. They have a Subaru engine on that gyrocopter over there, the E82, which is like 100 to 120 horse, depending on how you set it up. And we put the cowling up to the engine, and you got about 4 inches of spare at the narrowest point.
What radiators are you using?
These are custom made. Steve might be able to help you with that. He's gone through 2 sets. He made up one set that I have now, which are made out of brass copper, and he just came up with a aluminum set he had made for him, and that's why he's not here right now. He had 1 hour on flight time with it, and he just didn't feel comfortable coming 700-800 miles on something that wasn't really tested.
How big are the radiators used?
Memory serves are about 8 inches by 2 inches by 12.
Custom made or?
They're custom made. Matter of fact, if it got down to it, you'd probably have a set made up if you knew where the vents and everything go. One thing Steve did that I thought was particularly brilliant is that when we first started setting up the cooling system, did it in clear hose. You know, it got reinforced clear hoses instead of the regular rubber ones, and you could see what was going on inside the cooling system. And we found that we had steam pockets, a lot of them. And whenever you have a steam pocket, there's no flow, and the water will quit flowing. And a lot of times I've read where other fellows have put water-cooled systems together, they end up with a huge radiator or 2 or 3 huge radiators trying to get the cooling, and probably what they have is just a bunch of steam pockets. And once we were able to eliminate those by just moving a hose, moving it from here to there, or moving its exit, or actually rerouting it, as soon as they were gone, the system cooled fine. The brass copper radiator is cooling at 210 on the ground and 192 in the air, which is the thermostat setting. And the aluminum one's never leaving 192. And I've taken his plane up and climbed for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just trying to hurt the engine. It's same temperature, it didn't care. 12,000 feet down to 1,000 foot slip. Slipped it in from that altitude, it fell like a rock, 192. It just didn't care. Oh, I'm sorry, it went down to 185. It actually cooled off a little bit on the way down, and the engine just didn't care. It pulled out, apply the power, you're off going again. It's fantastic. Steve's running a pair of constant velocity, I think they call them, almost like a Bing. I keep forgetting the name of it's made in France. He's running those, and he's going to a fuel injection. I'm running a 2-barrel Weber downdraft carburetor. Dave Johnson will supply an adapter that will go between the stock Subaru intake manifold and this carburetor. He just outstanding. It's a beautiful unit, and they also he supplied the engine mounts and the carburetor adapter.
Paid for ours. Oh yeah. Subaru.
Outstanding. He's a great guy.
You can buy Subaru engine anyway.
I've talked to him quite a few. I haven't met him personally yet, but I asked him to come on.
Buying from them.
Yeah. Yeah. I called up all the reduction drive manufacturers, and I just sort of took a real liking to Dave, his style and everything. Dave Johnson's. It was like $1,400, I believe. Yeah, it was the most reasonable of all of them, and he was like a down-to-earth type of machinist. He's a retired man. He built a KR2, and he built this his reduction drive in order to drive his KR2 around, and he ended up coming into a business now. He has no time. He had to sell the plane because he has no time to fly. He's making reduction drives for everybody else. It's 1.5 gallons. It doesn't require a lot. Matter of fact, what's his name? The fellow out in Washington, Stratus. He flew that 150 into Lakeland from Washington State, and he's got basically a pair of heater cores, and they're doing fine. And he's done a very good job of cooling them with a very small amount of surface area. They don't require much.
I saw one installation that had the heater cores right inside.
Yes, that's what his style was. He went right by the main intakes. This is just a system we came up with while we were experimenting around, and it worked.
Was that in Lakeland?
He was at Lakeland, yes. It was at 150, Cessna 150. Yeah, that's the fellow I'm talking about.
There was a KR2.
Steve's plane.
Oh, Steve's? Steve's plane, he has them in the sides. He does have them in the sides. The air comes in the front, the normal entry ramp, and it actually exits through the radiators, which we found it works pretty well because it cools off everything under the cowling too, because instead of having the heat blowing into the cowling, you have it going out, and all the blast air for any electronics, like he's running electronic ignition he has up on his firewall, it's getting cold air, ambient air blowing all over it. It's not being preheated before it gets to him.
Did you build up your own engines or buy a build-up engine, Subaru engine?
Both of us bought cores. I paid $100 for mine. And we pulled it apart. It had 136,000 miles on the engine, and when we pulled it apart we found that there was still cross-hatching visible on the cylinder walls, and the only wear that we could visibly detect was one little burnish spot on one of the bearings, main bearings, and we sent it to the machine shop, and he mic'd up everything, including rings and everything were still within standards. And so I bought all new seals and all new gaskets, seals, bushings, bearings, and everything. It was like $350 and Magnaflux.
Did you have to go to Ford's piston versus the cast piston?
No, I took the stock stuff and put it back in. Matter of fact, I found that most of the aftermarket stuff for a Subaru is pretty much garbage, especially the thermostats you buy over the counter. As a matter of fact, the one that we bought several over the counter trying to cool the engines, and finally Steve managed to, he picked up his old one that was in the junk pile from all the stuff he threw out of the engine. He looked at the stock one, and he looked at the aftermarket, and he found the aftermarket was 1/3 smaller in diameter, the opening was 1/3 smaller in diameter, and they all were. And so we went and bought stock ones, and suddenly we had 1/3 more cooling capacity. Who would have guessed?
I read or heard somewhere that because of EPA regulations at the time that they were having to remove their engines at 30,000 miles.
Yep.
Some of them getting to this country with 30,000 miles.
Yeah, it's a funny thing is that it is true that from over there, about 36,000 miles is the limit you're allowed to run an engine for one reason or another. And they're selling us their old engines. And the one that Steve has, the dual carb version, is 100 horse E81. And it's not legal in this country to be used in a vehicle because it doesn't pass EPA. It was used as a truck engine over there. And the Japanese, of course, knowing it's illegal, had been sending it over here in lots of other engines, thinking they're slipping one past us. And I think they're now starting to realize that we are gobbling them up, and like we want them. And so because the price of a core is really skyrocketed. I think now it's like, at least at this point, I think it's like $700, $800 for a rebuildable engine, just to get it. But then by the time you're done, you're still way ahead of the game compared to what you're laying out for, I don't know, a RevMaster. I had a RevMaster, I broke a crankshaft. Steve went through like 3 crankshafts in his Porsche engine. And oh yes, for the price of the crankshaft, you could buy your engine and rebuild and a few other things. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's the RPM on the Subaru takeoff cruise?
Right now we're running them about, they redlined at about 5,200. We've been holding it back to, say, 4,800. And we've been cruising them about, say, 4,000, 4,200 at cruise. And the engine just loves it. As a matter of fact, we had a little bit too much pitch in Steve's propeller, and it was cruising fine, but they suggested he back off on the pitch a bit. The RPM went up a little bit more, and his climb improved, and his fuel economy improved.
You
So
said,
yes, sir.
you tell us a little about the noise, vibration, reliability, and so forth. Your opinion of those?
Yeah, I've flown behind my Revmaster, I've flown behind his Porsche, and compared to that, the Subaru is light years ahead. It's smoother. It feels good. That's a hard way to put that into words. It just feels good. It feels like it's going to bring you home. It feels very solid, where the VW conversions seem to be thrashing themselves to death under there. You didn't get that feeling in there. The shock absorption from the propeller, between the propeller and the crankshaft, has been taken, in my case, with a belt, and he has some kind of a clutch inside the NSI system that the propeller will spin one way, but the other way it spins free. And basically, that's how it absorbs that torsional load. And so you don't feel that back in the cockpit either. It just feels very, very good, very solid, very powerful compared to what was there before. I remember in the Revmaster, or his Porsche, you pull the stick back to climb out, and you watch that tack drop. And the Subaru, it just doesn't seem to happen. It just hauls you up.
If you pull back on the engine, that's the way the prop freewheel.
From what they say, if the engine quit, it would freewheel. But they're coming out with, in the NSI it would, but they're coming up with some kind of a lock. Like say if it did happen, you'd be able from the cockpit to lock it up to get a better glide. And of course with a belt drive, that's not going to be a problem. If the engine quits, it's not going anywhere, it's going to stop.
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
Bob, what kind of fuel economy are you getting on the engine?
Steve, we've been running his pretty hard. It's burning about, say, 4.5. Running hard. And we're looking towards the idea of running on regular. The engine's designed for regular, and the compression ratio was not that high. And I imagine if you kept it below 6,000, 7,000 feet, I don't see any problem with the fuel vaporizing or whatnot. It seems to run better. Matter of fact, I found in my own vehicles that I got much better gas mileage in my car with regular gas and high test. Sir, are you back there? You had a question?
Yeah, you mentioned your cruise about 170?
Steve's is, yes. Mine is not flying right now. I'm about a month away, maybe 2. We've been flying Steve's now for about a year, or not a year, about 100 hours, I should say. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, very, very much. We'll go on to some of the other questions that I am asked repeatedly out there running this as a business. They wanted to know about all these various landing gears I've got. They said, how many landing gears do you have right now? Well, actually, would say we had 4, but I sell very few retract gears anymore. Once people found out how fast the little fixed gears were, they have just been going with the fixed gear. Now, we do have a real pretty example out there that is retract Don Betcham's. I think most of you have gone out and taken a look at that, but that is his own design. Then we have talked about various ones. It says, well, now, what is the difference between the Deal gear and the Rand Robinson gear? The Rand Robinson gear was actually developed for the KR100 to give extra ground clearance, and because it was a personal choice of the gentleman who was helping me with it. It is a one-piece aluminum bent spring bar, a 7075 T6 aluminum. It has proven to be very successful, and as far as I know, we have had no failures of it. Everyone has been pleased with it. It gives you a little extra ground clearance, and it's a really very nice gear. Dan came out with a fixed gear that's a 2-piece composite, and that has been working out very, very well. One time I was kind of keeping track of who was choosing which, and it's about 50-50. They've asked, well, what are the advantages, and I think mainly for vans, isn't it the extra stance between the wheels that's turned out to be quite popular. They feel that it is nice, and it has a little advantage weight-wise. I think maybe 3 pounds lighter, is it, Dan? About in there somewhere. Then Dan came out with the fixed tri-gear, and that is really taking off. It's very, very popular. I'm selling mainly tri-gears now. Here in the last 5 or 6 months, too, the vast majority of our sales have started going overseas. We're selling to lots and lots of other countries now. About 1 kit a month is going to Brazil. When I get back, full kit's going to Brazil, another one's going to Australia. And that leads me to another thing that I've had a lot of requests for. They want more and more documentation. And I know a lot of us here in this country complain about our paperwork, but we're so fortunate. You have no idea what you have to do when you go to one of these other countries to feel, to please their bureaucracy. So I have contracted with a gentleman, Bill Marcy of Marcy Analytics, and he is going to go ahead and run all the numbers. This is what he does for a living, and do it for our KR2S to satisfy both the European and the Australian authorities. So that should be available maybe within 3 to 4 months. I would like to ask, John?
Skins.
What?
When are your skins going to be ready?
Oh, he's asking when are our wing skins going to be ready. Well, they're about 6 months late now, so probably another 6 months. He promised me, he says, well, last week they'll be ready in by Christmas. If we're lucky, they might be. Also, back to the wing skins, of course, I have also had a lot of people ask about tapering the spars, what to do about this, and what wings are available that can be used on the KR2S. We've run the numbers on it, and the KR2S would be just fine with a stock KR2 wing. If you want to plan to build a regular KR2 wing, that's perfectly all right. If you would like to use Dan Deal's wings, those will work also. His wing skins or the KR2S that we will be supplying will work, of course. The one decision you should make before you start tapering those spars is which set of wings you want, because each set of spars will be tapered differently. The stock KR2 will be one way. The ones that show my KR2S plans will have a different taper, and Dan's will have a little different taper from that. So just don't taper your outer spars until you make your decision, and then just go with it. And then let us know when you order your wing attach fittings which wing you're using, because the stock KR2S has a little different combination of attach fittings than our stretched one will. And I don't care which way you want to go, it's personal preference mainly. You'll also notice if you've looked at the KR2S drawings, how many out there are building KR2Ss now? Okay, quite a crowd of them. We have added extra rudder on the KR2S, and I've talked to Kevin, who designed the KR100 for me, is flying it in the Reno Air Races, etc. He said if you want to, you can leave the KR2 tail the same way it was always designed. It'll be a little bit faster, but for those of you who are wanting to fly with Continental engines, the extra rudder is probably important. Is there any other questions you'd like to ask?
Is the S any wider?
Is the KR2S any wider than a stock KR2? The drawings do not show it any wider. However, if you want to, while you're building, you can widen the fuselage right through the cockpit area, 5/8 of an inch on either side, and still make these parts fit. When you get back to the turtle deck, you better bring it back in pretty close to the other dimension, because the plans, the parts are not going to fit. Now, on the bottom of the fuselage, especially back there by the aft spar, you can widen that out to 34 inches. It'll just make your side a little straighter. A lot of people are doing that, and that will not affect the top deck. It'll just make a little wider airplane. We've had 2 or 3 do this already, and it hasn't seemed to slow it down. Any other questions while we're here? Well, I wanted to also tell you about marketing and as far as shipping goes, and this is one of the things we worry about when people start doing the airplane as you go, which is what we've always done. It's been very successful. It's very builder friendly, that you don't have to put up all this money at the beginning. You just buy your parts as you go. However, of course, for shipping, it becomes more expensive when you do it this way. And this is why we have encouraged the people who are especially buying all of the pre-molded parts to please buy them all as one unit so we can have boxes built. And over in the corner, and maybe we can show it even on the video, is the crate that's made to carry all of these parts. Looks a little bit big, but it almost has to be to hold them and to protect them. If you want to, and you can work with friends so that there's groups of you building, 3 sets of parts will fit in that box. And this is what we did for this event today. The 3 gentlemen over there from New Orleans ordered 3 top decks, and we shipped them in here in 1 crate. That way you can share the packaging cost and you can share the shipping cost. It doesn't cost any more to ship 3 than 1. So if you will work together as they are doing in partnership, it'll help you a lot. Any other questions? Well, shall we all get ready and go on to the dinner?
Long trip.
18 miles. KR1.
Murderous store.
Cool.
Yeah, just gonna make it out. Steve's running the NSI. I'm running the Dave Johnson show. Mine. They're both seem to be working out just fine. Stout.
That's the weather there, yeah, that's good.
What size prop is that?
I don't know.
Yeah, go look at it in the back of the truck.
Well, he does have much more. Oh, okay.
Way stronger than wood, that's what he worried about.
Some hand towels or something. Well, a sample layup this morning and talk about safety hazards and what we can do to protect ourselves against some of the hazards that, you know, of materials that you might encounter making a fiberglass layup. We're going to be working with foams and so on and so forth. Probably a lot of you know maybe more than I do about composites, but for the people that don't know, you know, what a composite is, basically a composite is a mixture of different materials. Basically, a lot of these airplanes here are made out of what they call a sandwich composite construction. And a sandwich composite construction is, well, for instance, this right here. There's a core material, and then we have a skin material on both sides. In other words, it forms a sandwich. And there's different types of core materials. We'll go through those first. This particular material here is a honeycomb material. And here's some raw stock honeycomb. Real thin piece. Different configuration of honeycomb. Here's a thicker piece of honeycomb. Sure, go ahead. And these are made out of paper. Honeycombs are made out of fiberglass. They're made out of phenolic materials. All kinds of different applications for honeycombs. Honeycombs are very strong, very lightweight, but they're still very expensive. So not too much use in the home-built hand layup application, you know, as yet. Other pieces of material that serve as good core material. This is a polyurethane foam. Very lightweight, 2-pound density foam. A lot of these KRs here, the wing panels, if they were made from scratch, were made out of polyurethane foams. Polystyrene foams. Another 2-pound density foam. This is this material can be hot wired and shaped. In other words, well, let's say for instance, we wanted to cut a shape that resembled a stick. We would attach that piece on one side, the shape on the other side, and take a hot wire and guide it along the top and bottom surface, and of course it would leave, you know, the shape of that stick the whole length of the piece of foam. Now, the shaping method, of course, on this, of course, this can be sanded, it can be hot wired, and of course, whenever you shape a piece of foam, it's going to leave things floating in the air. In other words, dust. If you hot wire it, it's going to emit smoke, and of course, these materials are not natural materials, they're man-made materials. So naturally, the smoke shouldn't be breathed. Just for instance, see if I can find some literature on 200 foam. Here's the 200 foam. Of course, I'm not trying to scare you to death. I'm just trying to tell you to kind of be careful when you cut this stuff. Okay, cut foams can release methyl chloride vapors. Now, methyl chloride vapors can cause all kinds of problems: dizziness, confusion, drowsiness, nausea, vomiting, seizures, unconsciousness, so on and so forth. So in other words, the vapors of, from cutting foams can cause a lot of problems. What can we do about those problems? Ventilate, plain and simple. In other words, draw the air past you, cut the foams in a big area where the fumes aren't contained, so on and so forth.
Is that just a hot wire?
That's with a hot wire. Yeah. These help a lot, but they're no substitute for fresh air ventilation. This mask of course, is an OSHA-approved mask for organic vapors. But I would still recommend good ventilation when we're cutting foams. Now, when we're sanding foams, this is an excellent mask. It'll keep all the the materials out of the nose and the mouth. And actually, when you're cutting foams or sanding on fiberglass pieces and so on and so forth, a lot of that dust floats and you don't see just exactly where it's going. A lot of it can get in your eyes. And if you feel this material, matter of fact, I'll pass a piece of both of this around. Kind of rub your fingers on it lightly. You'll feel a light grit. It's a real abrasive material, and if it gets in your eyes, of course it can scratch your eyeball, your cornea, and so on and so forth. It causes irritation and of course real uncomfortable sensation there. So it's something that you want to kind of keep away from your eyes. Of course, keep from getting in your mouth and your ears and so on and so forth. So it's just a kind of a mechanical nuisance, so to speak. Another piece of type of foam that polyester urethane foam. We call it elastofoam. It used to be called, made by a different company, a Clark foam. They make this type of foam in a higher density. Some of it can be scored and bent very easily, and I think this material is actually heat formable to a certain extent too. Yeah, that's right. And some in the long easy and the very easy and so on and so forth. They also use a material called Pledgecel. It's polyvinyl chloride, or PVC foam. This stuff is available in different densities also. In other words, for a weight-bearing member, a landing gear perhaps, or a landing gear box, or maybe a, yes.
What's recommended for sound absorption?
Well, there's other types of materials for that. They make, of course, woven fiberglasses that are encased in skins. They make a black material that's a denser rubber material and so on and so forth that they use for sound deadening. And of course, the foams to a certain extent will do that also. But the problem is when you have a big hollow fuselage shaped kind of like a megaphone, you create noise on one end and it kind of broadcasts it throughout the whole structure. So sound deadening materials inside the fuselage will definitely help in that instance. But this material here can definitely be heat formed, and a lot of preformed parts that aren't honeycombed use a Pledgecel material that are heated and drawn with vacuum to form a complex shape. Let's see here. Can't think of any other materials commonly used in the construction, or in a sandwich construction, so to speak. This is a sample piece which I'll pass around. This piece here is basically made out of unidirectional e-glass, fiberglass cloth, with a piece of this polyurethane material inside of it to form that stiffening agent. You can pass that around, flex it if you want, put it over your knee, try to bend it, so on and so forth. Yeah, notice the strength of that piece, versus the weight of what it is. And like I say, we're going to kind of build something, kind of half of that here on the table. Before I get my hands real messy, we've been over some masks. If you're going to be working with epoxies in a close space, actually, if you're going to be sanding epoxies in a close space, I definitely recommend using a mask like this, because there are vapors that come off, and of course the dust alone is enough to warrant a mask. This is a fairly decent dust mask, but I've had a lot of experience with these masks. They don't seal very well around the face, and they don't do that well of a job filtering out other things besides just dust, whereas this particular mask here will. Several things you can protect yourself, as far as your skin goes. I'll go from the least protection to the most. Let's see here. Well, we do have. There we go. I probably got that someplace else too. Yeah, that's okay. They make some gels, some hand gels. This is a Ply 9 material. Basically, what it is a water-soluble type of material that you rub on your hands, and it dries, and it forms like a skin, so to speak. And what it does is form a barrier in between what you're working on and the skin itself. It works real well unless you're perspiring a lot, if you touch a cold can or whatever. As soon as you touch anything with water, it breaks that barrier down. And of course, after a period of time, naturally, your hands are going to perspire enough that the protection is going to go away anyway. This is another product that does basically the same thing. And like I say, when it's first put on, I would say if you put it on and keep it fresh, in other words, every half hour to an hour, reapply, in other words, go wash off and reapply it, it would work fairly well. And of course, you can rub that up your arms and so on and so forth. Good for paints, good for solvents, good for epoxies, so on and so forth. You know, the only problem is, like I say, it doesn't last forever. Another form of protection, this is a latex glove. Latex gloves are real fine. They're cheap. You know, they protect your skin from the sticky, resinous type stuff that you might get on, you know, when you're doing a layup. But believe it or not, there's vapors and stuff in epoxies that permeate this latex member. They'll go right through this latex, and the stuff that actually causes you harm will actually get up against your skin. And of course, when you put this glove on, you know your hand's going to be hotter, which means your pores are going to be open, and it's going to let that stuff right down into your skin, and it's going to trap it in between the inside of this glove and your skin. So you know, I really don't advise using, you know, latex gloves for protection from, you know, the harmful agents and epoxy hardeners especially.
You should also mention not to put the cream and then the gloves
And then the glove. Yeah, because that's
Don't
actually,
do that.
yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Now, the thing that I like to use, you know, for good protection is use a cotton liner. If I can figure out how to get it on here. That'll kind of keep your hands dry. And then use a butyl glove. And these butyl gloves are a little more expensive, but they last for a long, long time. And of course, when you get epoxy on them, they're going to look scuzzy and stuff. But epoxy's not going to stick on them very well if you don't try to wipe them off. In other words, leave the gunk on them, and when the epoxy dries, you just kind of flex it, and all that stuff just kind of falls off. The same way with a squeegee. You know, if you don't try to clean a squeegee, you know, the thicker stuff will just break right off the squeegee when you flex it. I'm going to go ahead and protect myself with these gloves here and get kind of messy. Now, different epoxies, well, being they're all epoxies, they're all kind of created semi-equally, but some epoxies have things in them that we as builders need to know about and need to protect ourselves against. You know, a lot of people have been using a product called safety epoxy for years and years. Very good product, it works very well, lays the glass up very well, has real good structural you know, integrity when it's cured, and so on and so on and so on. The problem with safety epoxy products is they have a little thing in them called methyl dianiline. And methyl dianiline has been proved or linked with liver cancer with prolonged use. Now, what is prolonged use? Real good question. Is that 1 year? Is that 5 years? Is that 10 years? And here again, you know, a lot of people have played with this stuff for the better part of 10 years and haven't even shown any signs of you know, dermatitis or anything like that. But you know, being it's in a household environment, so to speak, an uncontrolled environment, we don't know just exactly what kind of you know, hygiene you know, practices these people use when they use this. I've seen people just go at this stuff with bare hands, and then when they're all done with it, they wash down with MEK or acetone, time and time again, and all of a sudden their fingernails are falling off. You know, the skin on the ends of their fingers are starting to flake off, and so on and so forth. You know, it's probably a combination between using epoxies unprotected and then washing down with MEK on top of it. So we don't know exactly what's causing the problem, but you know, basically, if you get epoxy on your skin, don't wipe down with MEK. Use soap and water. If it takes 2 or 3 times, use soap and water, but don't ever use thinner. Basically, what thinner does is dries all the oil out of your pores of your skin, and actually opens the pores up to let the epoxy down inside your skin where it's going to do the most damage. Of course, it's a bad idea to get thinner on your skin to begin with, but intentionally to do it to wipe the epoxy off is it's a double mistake to fix one. So
these effects are cumulative.
Definitely.
You could work with it for 5 years and then you
never
go out
bothered
one day and
that's what happened to me.
Problems.
I worked with it probably for the better part of 10 years and hadn't touched it for 2 or 3 years, and did a little project at home that I was surrounded maybe for, I don't know, 3-4 days. And I noticed the ends of my fingers, the skin right on my fingertips started to dry off, started to dry and crack off. All of a sudden I built a tolerance to it, an allergy to it, so to speak. I've had other people that are allergic to it almost instantly. And matter of fact, the safety epoxy, the reason safety epoxy was developed to begin with is because people had allergies to the original RE epoxy. A lot of people found, I kind of found out through talking to people that people were also allergic to the safety epoxy, and they went to the RE system and they weren't allergic to that. So everybody's chemistry is different, so to speak, and everybody has different tolerance levels and so on and so forth. You don't know if you're going to be, intolerant to this material in 6 months or a year or 2 weeks or what.
That's not called safety epoxy.
Yeah, it is.
Well, the last time I tried all this safety, I changed the name because that was misleading to say safety. It's F-E-T-Y.
I think they still call it safety epoxy. They call it an ethylite.
Oh, okay, ethylite.
But actually, an ethylite is kind of a chemical trade name, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, what about West?
West does not have MDA in it also. So it comes into the category of the RE epoxies, the down epoxies. This PTM and W epoxy does not have MDA in it. But see, the thing that that they don't tell you is all these things are chemicals, and all these things can cause allergic reactions. They can cause dermatitis. What they don't tell you is when you combine it with some foams, with some fiberglasses, and so on and so forth, you start sanding these, and all those little micro pieces of impregnated fiberglass pieces with epoxy are floating around, and you're breathing them, or potentially breathing them if you don't protect yourself with with proper equipment. You're breathing in a lot of irritants. And if you do that over a period of time and they keep building up inside of you, it doesn't matter really what kind of epoxy system you're using, you can develop a tolerance to it. So basically, I guess if I'm trying to say anything, try to protect yourself right from the start. Keep the stuff off your skin, try to keep from breathing as much dust and vapors as you can, and possibly you'll never have a problem. I kind of hate to talk to people that have gotten so allergic to these materials that they have to stop their project and sell the project when they're about 3/4 through. And I've actually talked to more than several people that has happened to. As a matter of fact, the one guy was so desperate to finish his project, he made like a moon suit, so to speak, that he drew fresh air from the outside and actually breathed outside air and had a bodysuit on, so to speak. He looked like an EPA guy going into Love Canal or something, But he actually finished his project that way. He just became deathly allergic to the stuff, and every time he'd even get around it or smell it or something, he'd break out into hives and so forth. So
dedication.
Yeah, but it didn't probably have to happen, so to speak. But anyway, let me do a little layup here just for the heck of it. This polyurethane foam is probably used just about as much as any foam out there for a core material. And the reason is it's fairly inexpensive. It cuts very easily. I can take a scissors and cut a piece of it off. It sands very easily, or shapes very easily. I can take a brush, gouge a space in it. It sands itself. You can use it to sand itself. See, that's smoothed a nice little hole. Sandpaper, of course, will sand it very nicely. It's fuel resistant, whereas some of the other foams aren't. The polystyrene, any kind of fuel or solvent or anything will just completely melt this away. And of course, some people use that to their advantage. They'll make a mold out of polystyrene foam and lay the glass up on it and pour thinner inside of it. It just melts away like it wasn't even there, and then they got a hollow structure. So, basically, if you know the characteristics of the materials you're working with, you can think of all kinds of ingenious ways of forming a complicated part. I'm not going to wear a mask, which I probably should, if I'm standing around on this stuff, but it'd be kind of hard to hear me, so I'm going to I'm going to do an unhealthy thing here. Say I've already formed this piece. I'm just going to say this piece is ready to fiberglass. Basically, what you want to do before you fiberglass is make sure, double check this piece of foam, and make sure that that's exactly the shape that you want. And the reason I'm saying this is because, say we got some minute dips and bumps and waves and so on and so forth in our foam. When we fiberglass that, of course the fiberglass is going to have the same exact contour to it. Now, it's a lot harder to put filler on the top of the fiberglass and try and get those dips and waves and bumps out than it is at this stage right here. Because this foam sands very, very easily. So you want to spend a little bit more time getting the foam as close to exactly, smooth as you possibly can, because it's going to save a lot of time and work and some weight, down on the other end. So say we got this piece of foam that's exactly the way we want it. We're going to make a layup. And of course I forgot my scale, which is another thing you never want to do, is to mix epoxy without some kind of a way of measuring it precisely. Yeah, I'm going to swagger right now, that's right. This epoxy is about a 2-to-1 mix, so I'm going to estimate what it is, but basically if an epoxy, say it's 50 to 100. Epoxies are a little bit different than polyesters. They're not promoted systems, so to speak. In other words, it's kind of like having a bag of bolts and a bag of nuts. You got to have the right amount of bolts, or the right amount of nuts to go into bolts, or things don't work properly. And that's kind of the way epoxies are. The molecules have to kind of match up, or they're not going to work. If you have too much hardener or not enough hardener, the system's not going to cure properly or not cure at all. So you got to kind of stick very closely to the recommended.
What can you do with the epoxy? Like I have some West, the slow one, and it's still fast. How can you slow it down?
Well, what kind of ambient air temperature are you working with?
About 80? 80s?
See, 80 is, well, 80 is not warm, but it's warm to an epoxy.
Getting there,
yeah. Yeah, it's getting towards the point of being warm. And, of course, the reason these epoxies kick off to begin with is because of an exothermic reaction, caused by the hardening agent, the catalyst. And of course, the more of it you mix, the faster it's going to kick off. The less of it you mix, the less it's going to slow the action down a little bit. I don't know how much material you're mixing at one time.
Well, like when we were doing, or when Malcolm was doing the gear legs. What did you make, around 8 ounces, something like that?
Okay, in other words, in a cup about this size? Yeah. Okay, and you got it out of the cup fairly quickly?
Sorry?
You got it out of the cup pretty quick?
Yeah, what I was going to use, what was left in there was, it immediately went to...
Yeah. Yeah.
What you using West System on? What you using it on?
The resin and the hardener.
The legs.
Like in the refrigerator.
Say it's not structured.
Advisable, inadvisable?
Well, that'll slow it down to a certain extent, but you pay a price because it gets very thick. And it gets hard to mix, and it gets hard to apply, and so on and so forth. So basically, what I would recommend is mixing a little less in the cup and mixing more often. Because probably once you got it onto the structure itself, it didn't really go that fast once you got it on the legs, did it? Then you're okay, because it got spread thin, and the exothermic reaction, in other words, the heat buildup was a lot slower because the volume was less.
But if you spread this area out and you were mixing it, you'd have the same principle.
Basically, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just a bigger volume naturally builds up heat faster.
That's right. That's true.
Yeah.
Does humidity also affect the quickness of the cure?
Well, it does, but I think in a negative way. Okay. It actually probably slows it, if anything. And a lot of these epoxies are kind of moisture sensitive to begin with. And what will happen is when these epoxies cure in a high moisture environment, what commonly happens is it'll trap moisture in that very top thin layer. And it'll have kind of a slick, sticky film on it. And
well, I'm worried about dry. I'm way up north, so
yeah. But commonly, down south and in areas where the humidity's way up, layups sometimes will stay sticky for a long time before that final, top film will dry off. And there isn't much you can do about it, except, you know, shoot for drier days and higher heat.
Epoxy mixes by weight?
By weight or by volume.
Or by
Generally,
volume, either one?
well, generally the ratio is different though. Say a 50 to 100 by weight might be a 46 to 100 by volume or whatever. So if you're mixing it by weight, mix it by what the can says by weight. In other words, don't mix up
Can's
the weight or
clear on which
yeah, that's
it
it. That's right. Like this one here says.
They usually give you both.
They'll tell you both.
Yeah, I'll tell you both on that. They recommend scales for that.
Yep.
44.
This is probably 44 to or
44 to 100.
I believe 44 to 100. Do not vary ratio. Now it says next one. 10. But anyway, there's, I'm sure it's on here. I'm just not looking at it properly. But they'll give you both weights, and both weights are actually in the catalog that we have too. But anyway, make sure and read the directions thoroughly and stick to what ratio that is. Another thing a lot of people don't do is thoroughly mix the epoxy once it's in the cup. What happens is the hardening agent tends to be a lot thinner viscosity than the resins. So you put a little hardening agent in on that thick resin and start spinning it. What happens is that the hardener spins towards the outside of the cup. And it kind of stays there if you don't take your stick and kind of get it off of there and mix it back into the middle. And generally, most of these cans recommend 2 to 3 minutes of mixing, you know, the catalyst in with the hardener to make sure that the mix is thorough before you start applying it. It's basically once you get your brush in there and start dabbling on, you know, if that stuff isn't completely mixed, you're going to have an area here that's got a lot of resin in it, and another area over here that's got a lot of hardener in it, and the two ain't going to combine once you get them on a surface. So at that point, you're probably going to have a layup that's going to be very slow to cure, or maybe not cure at all. And if it does cure, which is probably even worse, you're going to have a layup here that's not structural, which is for sure the worst case scenario.
One of the things we've done too is put the hardener in first and then switch it around the cup so that the thicker stuff doesn't stick to the outside. That way you know at least you got
most of that towards the middle of the cup.
Right.
Yeah, good idea.
Because if you put it in and switch it gets on the side, it's hard to pull off the side.
I got my epoxy, I think, fairly thoroughly mixed. Probably not the correct ratio, but we'll act like I measured it on a real good scale. The next thing, let's see, we got a bag of that real goody white stuff, Donnie? Oh, we got it in the cloud. Okay. I'm going to mix up what they call a slurry mix, and basically coat this piece of foam before I put the first layer of cloth down. And basically what all a slurry mix is some of this epoxy that I've mixed up with material lightweight.
Basically, I'd like to make an announcement of schedule change.
Epoxy with some filler material. This filler material is what they call a microballoon. The microscopic balloon is actually a round sphere filled with an inert gas, and this material is made out of glass. They also make it out of quartz, they make them out of phenolic, so on and so forth, but they're all basically microballoons. The reason I want to put that on the foam is because I want to fill in that porous top layer. In other words, give the layup kind of a mechanical bite onto the foam, so to speak. And if you noticed while I was mixing this glass bubble mixture, getting back into safety a little bit, this stuff is so fine, it takes almost no air to kind of make that stuff float. You get it in your nose, you get it down in your throat, of course you breathe it in your lungs. And this is material that doesn't really degrade or is not absorbed by the body, so to speak. So it can accumulate in the lungs. And of course, it's real kind of gritty on top of it, so it can cause some problems. I would assume probably that those little bitty tiny alveoli sacs in your lungs can probably be irritated or even possibly broke by those little things grinding around down there. So when you're mixing that stuff, it's definitely a good idea to wear a mask. Now, I got a slurry mixture here. Like I say, it's just basically an epoxy filler material. And it could be just a little bit thinner than this, but this is working out pretty good.
Is there anything that you can add to a mixture once you get it mixed to make it thinner that would still not affect the hardening?
Just in other words, a straight epoxy?
Well, yes.
Not that I'm aware of. Basically, if you want to make it thinner, you can actually heat it up a little bit.
Okay. I mean, I do that, but then that causes it to set too quick.
Well, yeah, that's right.
You know.
And then you got to really be careful about how much you mix, and of course, if you're doing a big layup.
I mean, see, you can take body filler that's had lid open for a while, and add stuff called smooth, and then you can work with it again. I don't know whether they had anything like that with fiberglass.
Not that I'm aware of at all.
I thought I put my paint gun and spraying it on. I couldn't do that.
Now, I'm going to go one step further, and say, for instance, we inadvertently dropped something on our nice big foam piece, and all it's got it in it is a little gouge. We want to fix that gouge. Well, how in the world do we do that? Well, what we can do is make a slurry mix that's a whole heck of a lot stiffer. We'll call it dry micro, just because that's what it's been called forever. And all it is now this is where you have a tendency to breathe up a lot of this stuff right here if you're not real careful. So I'm trying to make this real thick. And I'm swishing around a bunch of this dry stuff in this cup. And the stuff is so light that even if you breathe on it, half of it will float away. And I probably need a little bit more resin in there, but I want to save it. Anyway, this is some dry micro stuff. You can just kind of fill your hole right there, and it's just like it was never there. And it's lightweight. And basically, you want to make your layup over all of this stuff while it's all wet. That way you don't have to worry about sanding or doing anything like that. Fiberglass. Here's some fiberglass piece. Actually, I'm going to work with a piece of fiberglass, and then I'm going to put a piece of Kevlar or carbon or whatever the heck I might fancy over the top of it, just for the heck of it. I'll lay that down on the foam, smooth it out. Here again, see, I have a chance of getting a whole bunch of this stuff on my skin right off the bat here. I got gloves on, so don't worry about it. Now at this point, well, I got them open up here. There's not a whole lot of wet epoxy underneath my layup, but there is some, and the glass is starting to absorb the extra moisture that's underneath. But I'm going to put a little bit more on over the top. Basically, I'm just going to brush it on here. And wet that glass cloth out. Now, on bigger layups, what really works well, brushing is kind of slow. And if you got a big surface, you don't want to be messing around. What you can do is you can pour some epoxy on an area and take a squeegee and just start moving that epoxy around. Big, nice, even swipes. And it'll make, of course, it'll wet out the cloth and get that epoxy moved around, in a real big hurry. And after you got it all moved around on say, a wing panel, what you can do is start at one side and just start working the excess epoxy off the other. You can work it actually right back into your cup and use it to go someplace else. Until, of course, the epoxy starts to get kind of stringy, and at that point it's trying to set up and pitch it.
Out the door.
Yeah, that's right, because you don't want to be playing with it after it gets to that stage. Now this is, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it looks, pretty shiny. It actually looks almost kind of wet, doesn't it?
Totally white out, they call it.
And if it looks kind of, like it's kind of got an oil slick on top of it, it's just a little bit on the wet side. I could probably get a little bit of epoxy out of there, kind of dry that up a little bit.
Well, now you can put peel powder on top of that.
I can do that.
Much easier.
But I'm going to get to that when I get to the end. But say we're not going to put peel powder, which a lot of people don't like to do for some reason. But yeah. But say you're not going to use that, and you want to get some of that excess epoxy off there, you can just basically rake it off again. So what happens is, if you press it too darn hard, you can get too much out, and then it'll start, what happens is the fiberglass will start to turn white again. It won't be clear anymore. It'll start to go back to its,
Lose its saturation.
yeah. And at that point, you got too much out, and you'll have what they call a dry layup. And basically, all you have to do is just go over and put a little bit more back on again, or take some from a wetter area and move it back over to the dry area. And after you do it a while, you get to the point where you know how much pressure it takes, and you know what the look is, and so on and so forth.
So there is a certain amount of forgiveness.
Oh yeah, sure, definitely. And of course, an ideal layup is something that's kind of hard to accomplish by hand anyway.
Anybody got it yet?
Yeah. Now, if you're doing it in a vacuum bag, you know, you can kind of control things because you can draw an even pressure down over the whole layup, and you can draw the vacuum down to a point where it'll draw off, excess, and of course you got a bleeder, cloth under it'll absorb extra resin and so on and so forth. So it's a high-tech way of doing, this very same thing. Since nobody kind of messes around with carbon, I thought I'd just lay up a piece of carbon. It's not as mysterious a material as what one might think. I'm going to lay this up right over the top of my glass piece, and it really won't make a heck of a lot of difference. The carbon won't care, the glass won't care, the epoxy won't care. I'll put a piece of Kevlar right over the top of this carbon, and I'll have a hybrid layup, so to speak. And it's all fairly compatible. I mean, it is compatible. It'll lay up one to the other, to the other, to the other. The only difference is this carbon, being as it's a carbon product, it's fragile. And if you get to poking around and squeeging around and stuff like that on a carbon, what you can do is break those filaments fairly easily. And if you break a carbon filament, of course that strand, the strength of that strand is gone.
So why are we doing that anyway? Just to show that it can be done?
Just to show that carbon fabric can be laid up
no
basically
other purpose
the
for
same.
it. I mean, don't make it strong. Okay.
Well, carbon is actually stronger than fiberglass naturally, and it weighs less. But the impact resistance of carbon is real bad. But say we want to make a very lightweight, strong spar cap or spar. We could lay that up with carbon and get probably 3 or 4 times as much strength out of it with theoretically half the weight.
What's the price difference? Is there any?
About 3 or 4 times. Carbon is about $18 a yard.
Next question.
And e-glass is about $3 or $4 a yard.
Next question.
But
How fast can you afford to go?
Don't think I needed that strong.
But basically, it lays up, the same as anything else. And you can lay it up with a combination of glass cloth, Kevlar, so on and so forth.
Is it as easy to tell when you've got a dry or a wet layup with the carbon?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. If you look at it in the right kind of light, I can tell that this is pretty wet. Because if you look at it from the side, see, it's kind of puddled a little bit. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's real shiny looking.
No. You could use peel ply with it too.
And you can use peel ply over this just like anything else. You
always
betcha.
make sure you put enough in to get it back
Yeah,
on.
that's right. And carbon wets out a little bit slower. At least that's been my experience than a lot of glass cloths do. So you can't get in a real big hurry trying to get carbon wetted out. And the same way with Kevlar. Kevlar doesn't like to wet out all that quickly either. Now this is a thinner Kevlar, or thinner, or a lighter weight cloth than the carbon I had below it, and of course than the fiberglass cloth. So it's going to wet out fairly quickly.
Does this really boil down to a lot of times to what you want to use and not which is necessarily the best?
Application is everything.
Plain, I guess maybe.
Well, and on top of that, Kevlar, I think people have been duped into thinking Kevlar is stronger than fiberglass. Well, Kevlar is stronger than fiberglass in certain respects, and it's actually less strong in others.
Depending on what you use it on, I guess you're saying.
Yeah, well, basically, Kevlar has less tensile strength, I think, than e-glass. But abrasion response is huge compared to e-glass. And carbon, of course, it has a huge bunch of tensile strength, but it's got no impact resistance or abrasion resistance at all.
It's kind of like a windshield. You can hit it with your fist and it bounce off, but you take the side, it's gone.
So you use Kevlar if you want your aircraft bulletproof?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Well, you plan to fly to.
And it's very flexible, so possibly if you incorporate it in
That's
the
why I
landing
didn't make it. You didn't make it.
without breaking, it would be a good application.
Over.
Say if you had a well, just for instance, a boat hull.
I hate
that makes contact with a bunch of logs and stuff in the water. So Kevlar would be a great application. Of course, for bulletproof vests, it's a great application.
Taking no chances.
But if you want flexibility and abrasion and impact resistance, Kevlar is the answer. If you want strength, high strength with low weight, carbon steel. If you want an all-around purpose, light, fairly strong, inexpensive material, E-glass is the answer. If you want a little bit more strength, you can always go to an S-glass. Most of the German sailplanes are made out of S-glass. And it basically lays up exactly the same as all this stuff too. Matter of fact, this material right here is an S-glass. You can't tell by looking at it. Looks just like an E-glass.
They list KR glass, but it looks like a different weave from that E-glass you're using there.
This is KR glass right here. We can put one of them on top too.
It's not.
We'll go back with an E-glass again here, by golly. But you can see that.
Well, which is the better to use, the KR glass or the E-glass?
Well, the KR glass is an E-glass. That's the type of glass.
So they don't make it anyway. They just bag it.
And basically, as you can see, the only difference between that glass and that glass is kind of the weight. That's the way it looks, so to speak. They're both, well, this is a little bit heavier weight, and that's why it kind of looks a little bit heavier. And this is a little bit lighter weight. And this is a unidirectional, so most of the weave is running in one direction. But basically, the KR glass is like a, what is it, a 5 or 6 ounce, something like that.
Yeah.
You can use either glass. However, you're going to change the number of flies you're going to put on your layout. When you calculate for a thickness of glass.
Yeah.
Whether you do it with heavy cloth or light cloth.
Yeah. 2 layers of heavy cloth is the same, almost the same thing as 3 layers of lighter cloth, so to speak. But you have to have the same amount of glass, is what we're trying to say, to get the same strength out of it. So, I hate to tell people that they experiment around with stuff because I don't know what their engineering background is. If we know that 2 layers of glass cloth works on a KR wing, then I recommend 2 layers of KR cloth, not 3 layers of, some cloth that's lighter weight or whatever.
Supposing you did make a layup and didn't get the right ratio, or you got cold on the night or something like that, you'll come back next morning, it's set up, but it didn't harden.
Okay.
You don't do it again and get the right ratio and put it on top of that. Because that's going to come right back up.
Well, let's see. If it's
set up, but
if it's done set up,
but it didn't. It's not right. You can't grind it. It didn't harden. It's set up.
Oh, okay. And it's still sticky?
Yeah.
Well.
The best thing to start over.
Basically, you have 2 choices. What I would do.
You can't make another ratio and put it on top of it.
No.
It'll come right back up.
That's right. Basically, you got 2 choices. You can wait and get it out in more heat in a drier environment and see if it'll work. And most of the time, it don't.
It don't.
And basically, at that point, all you can do is remove it.
Right.
And start over.
That's right. You can put a heat gun on it. If it says all the time, it's not hard. That's just it.
That's it. That's right. Now, you were talking about using a peel ply over the top. Basically, say we're done with this this layup, and we determine that our glass, the epoxy ratio is right. In other words, it's not too wet, it's not too dry. It's perfect. We can do several things. We can walk away with it, or walk away from it, and leave it cure, just like this. And of course, the next day we come back and this thing is real hard. Now, basically, as you can see, we got a weave structure here that's kind of rough. And of course, we don't want to paint that surface. We want a nice smooth surface that looks like a piece of glass. At that point, to get anything to stick on this, to get anything to stick on any kind of cured epoxy, it has to be rough sanded. And just to give you an example, see, here's a piece that's been laid up. It's hardened, and you can see it's real shiny. I can't get anything to stick on that, period, until I rough sand it. Here again, here comes big need for mask and skin protection. Actually, if you've ever sanded fiberglass, you know, laid up with polyester or epoxy or whatever, you realize that stuff gets in your skin and just irritates the living what out of you. So basically, I recommend a long sleeve shirt with some gloves on and a good mask to keep the stuff out of your lungs. Basically, what you want to do, what you have to do at that point, is just rough sand that and make that look kind of dull, and remove all the dust. And if you get any oils on it or whatever, that naturally has to be removed too. But then you can actually make a layup right over top of that, just like we did when we started this. Now there's another method. We can use what material? It's a Dacron cloth. And Dacron is kind of a plastic. And plastic, it's a kind of plastic that epoxy really doesn't adhere to, so to speak. And what you can do is lay that down after your layup is done, and any kind of excess resin you got in that final ply can basically be worked up into that peel ply. And when everything cures, believe it or not, you can take that peel ply strip and just peel it off of there.
After the fact?
After it's cured.
Right.
After it's cured.
That's
And then what it looks like is this. And see, that's not shiny. That's got a dull finish to it.
Makes anything else stick to it too.
And you don't have to sand this because it basically what happened was this peel ply, you know, when epoxy cures, remember I said it forms some kind of a waxy oily film on the top surface. Well, the top surface is on the top of that peel ply, and when you peeled it off, it peeled off that top layer. Now you're more or less in between the first layer and the second layer. So that residue that was, you know, involved in cure against, you know, the air is gone. So we're left with a surface we can glue to, or basically what I can do is I can take some of this dried filler material and apply that straight to that peel plied surface.
How expensive?
The peel ply?
Oh, it don't cost.
Yeah, it's not all. Well, let's judge it against. Yeah, let's judge it against the time and effort.
You use it one time.
Basically, the peel ply comes in little rolls: 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 6 inch, and it also comes in big sheets that's up to 72 inches wide.
You do a weenie.
Yeah.
Would that peel ply be the same material you could buy in a fabric store?
No. No, this is basically this Dacron material is the same material that they cover tube and rag airplanes with, and they do sell Dacron fabric that is basically a non-certified thing. In other words, it didn't pass muster to put a stamp on, so to speak, and it's generally cheaper. But for what we're going to use it for, we don't care. You know, we're going to put it on and we're going to peel it off and we're going to throw it away. So, you know, as long as it goes down smooth and it peels back off, that's all we care about. Now,
But it doesn't really have any release.
Yeah.
Does it really have a release agent on it? The peel ply. Some of them advertising having a release agent on it.
Don't need it. Just
well,
I tried the regular Dacron. It will peel.
It'll peel, yeah. I think just the nature of the Dacron itself, it don't really need a release agent because you'll find if you play with epoxies any time at all, you're going to be trying to stick almost anything to anything, and you're going to find stuff that you can't stick down with epoxy. You know, certain kinds of plastics, the stuff that these pre-molded wing tips are made out of. Impossible to glue with epoxies because there's some kind of a waxy.
It's a mechanical bond.
Yeah.
Well, your other forms, what's it? Vinyl ester. That's a chemical bond. They
Right.
actually melt in a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't use the Dacron you buy from a fabric place because some of it has sizing in it.
Right.
Know?
Right.
And
right.
you know, you don't want the sizing left back on your layups after you peel it off. You know, that's a contamination.
Yeah, that's
your
right.
paint's not going to stick. Your next layer of glass, if you glass over, it's not going to stick.
Or your filler or
And you're
whatever.
gonna hate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So buy the stuff from a source that you know the quality of the materials that you buy from. Then you're not going to run into this non-compatibility problem.
Right. I was
What he's bucking for free.
gonna say Griffin, but I didn't want to get thrown out. So what do you think?
Now there is another trick that I haven't mentioned, and it's a hard trick to accomplish, but it works very well too. When epoxy cures, it goes through, different stages of development, so to speak. And this is a wet stage, and the next major stage would be what they call a knife trim stage. And what happens is it gets kind of stiff, but yet it's still kind of sticky, but it's not wet. It kind of feels like a piece of bubble gum laying there. And at that point, what you can do, being it's not wet, you can take your filler material. If you catch it at that stage, and you probably got well over an hour, it'll stay in this stage before it completely cures off into a hard, surface like this. You can actually trowel your dry micro or your filler material on that whole surface without sanding because it hasn't completely cured yet. And being it's not wet anymore, it won't suck, wetness out from that top layer of cloth. And the reason you don't want it to do that is because you want to keep this dry micro or this filler material as dry as you possibly can, because when you go to sand on it, the drier it is, the easier it's going to sand. You try to sand, a piece of dry micro mix against a piece of raw epoxy, and you'll see very, very quickly which is going to be easier to sand. So basically, you want to lay this dry micro down on something that's dry, so that you keep the dry micro dry. Now that we're into dry micro right now, we played with a material called glass bubbles. West system epoxies sell, an epoxy line naturally, but they also sell a microlite filler. And basically, this is a piece of fiberglass again, just like this, that I've troweled on some West system epoxy with some of their microlite filler. And the major advantage that I can see using that product for a final fill, West system epoxies tend to be more flexible, and their dry micro, or their glass bubbles, seem to be, I don't know, more easily sandable. And of course that really helps when you're going to finish. And also you can make the stuff real dry, and you can still trowel it on it. It kind of goes on like cake icing. Whereas if I make this stuff real dry, you can see what was happening. Well, maybe you didn't see, but when I was trying to trowel that on, it was it rolled up behind me. And it seems like the West system with the microlite in it doesn't do that. Now Stitz also sells a product called what the heck is it? No, it's that kit, that microlite.
Microlite kit is?
Yeah, it's a microlite kit. Basically what it is kind of a pre-mixed filler material. It's a lightweight microballoon material that does basically the same thing. So, there's several different products that you have choice of using, so to speak. This is the old standby, but I don't like, the way it trowels on when it gets real dry, and it doesn't sand particularly easy. Whereas this stuff, sands, real nice, and it goes on real easily.
You're talking about different, I guess, layers and levels of progression. Mm-hmm. Can you mix and match between manufacturers, or do you just want to stick with one system all the way?
You mean the epoxies?
The epoxies, and then go into somebody else's balloons.
There could be a potential problem with that. Basically, we sell quartz balloons and glass balloons. Quartz balloons will work with some of our epoxies, but it slows the cure rate way down on others. In other words, they don't recommend using quartz balloons with safety epoxy products. I don't know if the quartz interacts with the chemical makeup of the safety epoxy mix or what exactly happens, but it slows down the cure rate. Glass balloons, I've never had a problem using it with any of the epoxies. And as far as I know, that the microlite will work with any of the epoxies too. It just works better with the West system epoxies for this particular application. So basically, once that stuff is cured, you're basically ready to start sanding. And of course, when you start sanding with a big block, going, say this is a wing panel, and basically you'd sand at kind of a 45-degree angle to this panel, and you're going to find low spots where that you know, a 12-inch square block or whatever isn't hitting. And you know you got to refill those areas and so on and so forth. It's just a matter of, you know, just keep them going until all the areas are sanded with a rough piece of sandpaper, and then you basically block the whole surface out with some primer surfacer that's got ultraviolet barrier coat in it. And the reason you want to use ultraviolet barrier coat is because all of these materials are very light sensitive. In other words, ultraviolet light sensitive. All this stuff will degrade from ultraviolet light. So you want to protect everything below there from the sun. And of course they go generally with lighter colored paints on the surface because they want to keep the surface heat buildup to a minimum. You know, a lot of these materials, you know, this is going to cure basically at 80 degrees, or room temperature. Now, being it's catalyzed, so to speak, it will probably cure or post-cure, say, so to speak, at maybe double that, so 160 degrees. It will be, in other words, it will remain stiff up till that temperature. But you take it up much over 160, 180 degrees, say up to 200 degrees, it'll soften. Believe it or not, I could probably take this piece out and get it hot enough, and this piece will just kind of sag.
We're getting to a melting state, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, what they call it a post-cure.
Okay.
You're trying to cure this at a higher temperature, so to speak. And of course, the last thing you want to do is roll your airplane out after it's all completely painted, put a dark color on it, and the sun beats down on it, and the surface temperature goes up to 300 degrees or 250 or 200 degrees, and all of a sudden the epoxy starts to soften out, and the wing kind of sags just a tad. And it might only, yeah, and it might only do it just a fraction. You might not even be able to tell that it did it, but it's going to disturb the the airfoil of the wing. And of course, all of a sudden, it's not going to be flying quite right. You can't figure out why. So that's basically why they paint, the surfaces white to keep, that heat buildup down. Now, a lot of these other airplanes, these pre-made airplanes, glass airs, Lancers, so on and so forth, they're oven curing most of their parts.
They don't have any trouble.
No, not at all, because they take their epoxy systems up, and of course they're using different epoxy systems. You're using oven-cured epoxy systems, so to speak. But they take those things up to 200, 300, 400 degrees, possibly. You're never going to encounter anything like that out in the sun, so you don't have to worry about post-curing.
On these layup epoxies, does it make any real difference which of these systems one uses?
Well, here again, that's up for major debate.
Probably once you learn one system, stick to it, because it's a learning curve. Now when you're finishing, same thing, because if you change from micro balloons to quartz, now you have sectors that are harder than the other ones, and when you sand, your sandpaper is going to eat into that one and leave that one alone, so you end up with a potato instead of a wing. That's basically not good. And the post-cure, that long easy that's parked out there, it took 4 of us to put the top cowling on, because everything that shifted. And we left it on the sun and started the engine and let it heat up really good, and now you can just put it there nicely. It's been post-cured. But once you go up to that temperature and moves, it's like you're giving it a temper. The next time you want to flex it again, you got to go a little bit higher. So resist the urge early in your project to really make everything fit. Wait till the end when you really need it to fit, not before.
One system proven to be stronger than the other. It's all the same. You get it mixed right.
Well, like I say, that takes a chemical engineer to actually tell you that. I can't tell you that because I represent all kinds of different products. But basically, what I recommend to anybody is if say you're building a long easy, use what Bert Rutan recommends to build with a long easy, or if you're building a Lancer, use what they recommend. If you're using a PR, use what they recommend, and so on and so forth. Because there's been hundreds of builders use that material, and it has proven that this material actually works. So why reinvent the wheel, so to speak? So, basically.
But it says the west system is structural. That's what the direction says. The catalog says not structural.
Yeah, but see, they use it for structural members in boats.
Can you use it?
Well, I'm not a designer of an aircraft, and I don't know of anybody that's actually used West epoxy systems for a structure. I can't recommend it. Now that whether it's any difference in the Dow or any difference in this, between you and me, I don't have any idea. So that's a real good question. But they build all kinds of things out of it in the boat industry with West. apparently they don't ever have any trouble. They take a pretty good whack all the time. So, but we're talking about different kinds of strengths and so on and so forth. So, but a lot of people run into trouble trying to use substitutions for one reason or another. Generally, they're trying to substitute less expensive products for other things, and sometimes you can get away with that if you know just exactly what you're doing, but in a lot of cases you don't have enough information to work with.
The West system's easy.
Oh yeah.
It's not real thick like that EB rocks.
Yeah. But you know, we have other, you know, the Dow is a little bit thicker. It's fairly inexpensive. The safety epoxies aren't real thick. The REs are real thin. I mean, I've never ever used an epoxy system that's any easier to wet glass out than the original RE resin system. Works great. And you got a choice of a fast hardener, a slow hardener. It doesn't have MDA in it. It does cause dermatitis, but hell, you know, just between you and me, all this, you know, liquid stuff on the table does the same darn thing. You know, it's all a chemical, and it's all foreign to our you know, natural body, so it can potentially cause the same kind of problem.
KR gathering this is? 14th. 14th KR gathering. I think they first started in Tulsa. Is that correct? Anybody know that? California? I'd like you guys help decide where we're going to next. So think about that. I'd like to fly somewhere myself.
For you.
Great job. Well, I do appreciate that. I think it's turned out real well. Everybody here, in typical KR fashion, have been really nice. The people that's taking care of us, and I think that kind of works, doesn't it? When you take care of the people that take care of you. A good example of that is the Raider Aviation and how they've treated us, haven't it? Do what? Big Bob is here. He just kind of snuck in and nobody saw him, the little guy. And I'm going to have Bob stand. But I would like to say thank you to Raider Aviation and everything you've done for the KR gathering. I asked you guys to help. I just went to them and say, I'd like to have some guys fly in here, and you guys don't be too tough on them because they fly like crazy people. And can you help me out if you would? And well, they've done everything. They've done everything. They've gotten tables for us. They've got chairs for us. They've gone to high schools and come and let them cook for us. You know, that worked good for everybody. And I like Bob Ballard, Raider Aviation, stand up. Stand up, would you? I really can't say enough of what they did. I really can't. And some people, and probably most people have already heard, Bob and Tom took over that FBO about almost not quite 2 years ago, and they've turned it around. It's never been a bad airport, but it's not been run the best. But they turned around, and they are the #1 airport in Tennessee, voted last month, and we're all proud of them, those that are fortunate enough to be hangared here. So thanks again, Bob. We have a few trophies up here to give away today. I don't know who won what at this point. We have a few door prizes. I'd like to, before I give out any of the trophies or any of the door prizes, first I'd like to thank Wicks Aircraft, who is not here tonight, but they were there all day today, helping people understand composite materials and how to handle them safely. I think we ought to give Wicks a hand of applause, and they weren't here. I think that we have probably, last year at the KR gathering, I don't know how many people didn't come to that one, but we had 22 KRs of different types. 2 KR1s and 20 KR2s. I think we had probably the most versatile representation of KRs and what you can do with them at this fly-in as we've had any we ever had. We had 15 or 16 out there. How many we have? 15 or 16, one or the other. But we had just about anything that you want to do with KRs I could think of. Somebody did it out there today. So I think we got a good showing of what's available and how versatile the KR can be. So at this point, I'd like Bob Lee to come up, who was chairman of the judges, or I don't want to call him chairman of judges, but he helped put the judges together and helped get the paperwork together, and he'll explain how the judging went.
So we're transitioning out of best interior into best cockpit, and as a transition year, we call this best overall interior. And the winner for that one is November 250 KB, Don Beecham. It just has to be good, right? And here again, we tried to judge that not from what kind of engine you had, but from how you put the engine you had in there and how safe it was and how functional it was. And the winner on that one is November 58 DR, Jim Hill. There's best engine. You know how to smile for her, right?
Well, it hasn't fallen out recently.
And these were really close. It was tough to call them, but we got it. Best KR1. That was the toughest call of the whole meeting. And unfortunately, I have to say, where is Mike? Where is he? Okay. The toughest part about that is I didn't know Mike's first name. So, come on up here, Mike. That's right. He scared them so bad they didn't even show up. We got it. Best KR2. That's the one. Okay, drum roll, please. Da-da-da-da. Here we go. About is November 122 Bravo. And this... I want to tell y'all, he last year, and he said he couldn't believe it because he didn't have his wheel pants on and he didn't have the gap seals around his wings, and so he went home and worked on the airplane for another year, and he got it better. This is an appreciation award from KR Gathering 94. And I know Marty's standing there saying, why in the devil am I getting this award? Okay? But Marty has done one thing to promote this sport that nobody else has, and that is freely given anybody a ride that either needs to qualify for flying his own airplane or is interested in building it. And he's flown more people than anybody I know in KR2s. And
having to do with the longest distance. So, I needed to find out who flew more than 200 miles.
40 hours. I just flew my 40 hours.
When did you fly home? Fourth award is in Papa. Did he leave? He's outside with his son right now. That's Troy. Troy's based right here in Columbia. Is based upon everybody's choice of the best KR, whether it's KR1 or KR2 out there, and we do this every year. And you, winner of the People's Choice Award, 1994, KR Gathering in Columbia, Tennessee.
Thank you.
And we got one of those lightweight pilots with him too. If we don't want to have it here this year, Raider Aviation said they'd like for you to come back. You've been a great crowd. I'm supporting it myself. If you want to come back here next year, great. Want to come back? Anybody? Okay, good. That's pretty close to everybody. Is that okay, Bob? Okay, we got them. We'll come back here next year.